And we are live. I want to take a minute for everyone to drift in, and hopefully, people will start saying why or yes to say that they are here. Okay. And it looks like we are going. So, today we are with Jack Barsky, deep undercover KGB agent, who is the first, or not the first, but he's one of many great guests we've had. And as I've told everyone before, the whole point behind this is for you guys to ask questions of my guest. I've done a lot of research. I did a really great interview with Jack that I'm quite proud of, but I'm sure that you all have questions too. So if you guys don't mind, make sure you start asking them. Now, I'll start off with one right now. How are you doing today?
I caught a virus. It's called SC911, stir crazy.
Yeah, we were just talking about that you're under a bit of a lockdown. There's whatever's going on from the state, but then even worse, what's going on at the house.
Yeah, wife is worried about, because I'm ancient and I'm supposed to be part of the a member of the high risk category. I deny this till my dying days. But you want to keep the peace in the house, and if somebody else can do the shopping, so be it.
Well, perfect. And we already have the first question coming in. How close to the TV series Americans is the reality?
This is. I've been asked this question a lot. I got to give you two answers to that. First of all, when it comes to the espionage activities of an undercover agent, none of that is anywhere near reality. It just doesn't work the way this is displayed. You can't have a travel agency and clients and do all kinds of things and travel all kinds of places, and you have kids and all that, and then do all these activities that these guys were doing. On top of it, they were like super agents. They knew how to do everything. Pick a lock, decipher code, stuff dead people into suitcases, and on and on. That's just fiction. It doesn't work like that. And on top of it, this guy being married to somebody else who didn't know that there was none of that works for me. Having said that, I met the producers a couple of times, and they always claimed that this is really not an espionage story. It's a story about a marriage. And in that respect, the psychology, the pressure that comes with being undercover is quite well displayed. And eventually, this story, I never watched the last episode. Eventually, has a pretty sad ending, I understand. But in general, let me volunteer something here, and that may take my producer friends off a little bit. This series really may have done a little bit of damage to the United States citizen stance with regard to espionage, because it looks so real. Everybody, I never got the question, other than in jest, whether James Bond is real. Because everybody knows that's not real. So spies don't run around and seduce pretty ladies all the time and shoot guns and drink and all that and are really good looking.
But that's why you signed up, right?
Well, I'm one of those, but but anyway, the Americans looks more real when in fact it's not. My experience is real because I was it. And I was fundamentally not detectable. You couldn't have found me unless you were really sharp and would wonder about, why this guy has a funny accent, and he graduated from college when he was in his 30s, and he was valedictorian. I just, something doesn't add up. But Americans are so naive and so gullible, and they will leave a lot of. Americans are really nice people, and that's a good part of it. But the naivete is not very good for counterintelligence. So I'm sorry, I can ramble on and on, but I'm going to stop right here. If there's a follow-up question, I'll take it.
No, that's fine. Actually, on that note, when you talked about how people would suspect things, is it possible that because of your profession, I think we talked about this before, what you chose to be in, IT tends to, shall we say, attract people who aren't necessarily socially as adept as others, and can be really, really, really hyper intelligent and may not necessarily get along. So you actually would be closer to the norm with, let's say, a Bill Gates or a Mark Zuckerberg than you are to the football player Biff.
But don't put me in that company in the same breath.
Okay.
I was a manufactured introvert. I'm not an introvert. Right. And it took me a long time to find that out, because, and I tell you why I really figured this. I was a class clown. I would lead the gang, in college, and singing drinking songs. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed being on stage. Introverts aren't like that, but when you are an undercover agent, you need to keep things close to the vest, and you need to keep people, somewhat away from you. So I adopted a lot of introverted behavioral traits. And once I got out of all of this and I became a public figure, I embraced my old self again. That was an interesting journey, by the way. But the question that you asked initially about spies in IT, there's a lot of folks, introverted IT specialists, who are and feel underappreciated.
Oh, sure.
And that can lead to all kinds of weird behavior.
They're good to recruit, aren't they?
Hansen, it was a mole in the FBI who spied for the KGB. He was an underappreciated IT guru. Enough said. So yes, I would be concerned with IT geniuses. Honestly, that doesn't mean, be careful. I'm not saying that there's a high likelihood that, your best IT guy is a spy. No, but it's more likely than, say, among heart surgeons, right?
Right. Well, they're susceptible to recruitment, right? Like maybe you could have some attractive women or something, or different things.
Especially with an introvert who doesn't know. They may be wonderful and lovely and attractive. I hope my son is not listening. I have a very good-looking son who is somewhat introverted, and he had his first steady girlfriend when he turned 30. He's a knockout. But anyway, yeah, that would be a vulnerability for an introvert.
Now, did you ever recruit or flip anybody personally, or would you just drop a dime and say, hey, get a hold of this person, they might be somebody worth contacting or converting?
The rules of the game within the KGB were that you don't do that. I was, among other tasks, I had the task to be a talent spotter. That means you identify people. Whatever happens with them once identified, they won't tell you. I was never given any feedback, not even a hint. Say that was a really valuable lead. Nothing, zero. So you got the one that is a spotter. Then you got the one who recruits, and assuming that the recruitment is successful, the newly minted spy will then be handled by a third person, and the three individuals within the KGB wouldn't know of one another and wouldn't know the history or what happened after. So
that makes sense. Now, one thing I'm interested in too is we've talked before about how you have a very strong independent personality and you're very adaptable, can think on your feet. And that's why you were chosen for this.
yes,
Not everybody can just do it. But because of these things, you were seen as a short term like a 10-year clock, that they assumed that you would not be loyal after 10 years. I don't know what the term would be.
Well, there were some hints that the shelf life of an undercover agent
Shelf life, thank you.
Is about 10 years, simply because you just grow into the role that you're playing. It isn't that you're on stage and then you go home to your real life. The stage is your real life. And so if you play that role really well, at one point, there is no more distinction between the real life and the game that you're playing. And so that was a pretty sharp a conclusion. They seem to be willing to drag my my stint a little longer, because by the time I hit 10 years, I was still active and nobody thought about calling me back until they thought the FBI was ready to pounce, which was false. But nevertheless, it was about 6 months past my 10-year anniversary.
That was in 88 though, right?
Yep.
And Fall of Berlin Wall was about 89. So, I mean, was it also because things maybe were a little going bad back home or not perfectly in alignment?
No, I don't think so. And I now, with time, I find a lot more pieces to the puzzle as to what happened in my case. I met a fellow in Germany who was just like me, an undercover illegal in the United States, also in New York. He was called back at the same time. At the very same time, and he went back in a way that he actually was able to go back to the United States. They found out 3 months later, hey, false alarm, go back, and so he went back.
Oh, maybe they thought they had a defection or something. That would make sense, and they had to.
First of all, the KGB, unlike current Russian intelligence services, was very worried about their agents getting caught. So they were extremely nervous at any point when there was some thought that, somebody might get caught, they will pull them out rather than, take the extended risk or not worry about somebody getting caught, because, there's also nowadays, I think Russia thinks there's value in people getting caught simply because that scares us.
Oh, an embarrassment, like Anna Chapman and that kind of thing?
Embarrassment, and and Americans getting scared and seeing Russians everywhere. It's part of the psychology. It's different from, again, the KGB was very protective of their agents, very protective.
Okay, well, this is really kind of Putin, isn't it? I mean, is it his philosophy that's being pushed down, or is that in general philosophy?
Well, I would think he doesn't disagree with that philosophy. Otherwise, it wouldn't be in action that way. I don't think everything always comes from the very top. A single individual doesn't have the bandwidth to do that, but clearly he agrees with the overall strategy. Otherwise, when remember in 2010 when those 5 illegal couples were caught, they celebrated them back home. They became, even though it's clearly documented that they really achieved nothing other than hanging out illegally for a number of years. But the propaganda value that the Russians thought they have is like, in your face. Look, there may be many others, and I'm hearing this a lot. People asking, how many sleepers do you think are still in the United States? I'm not going to answer my own question though.
Okay. All right. Well, it sounds almost like a similar strategy as terrorism. Every terrorist attack means that we're under threat and that we could be attacked or we're vulnerable somewhere else. So that
Uh,
seems like a similar principle.
Agreed. And in that, within that framework, you have no compunction sending not highly trained people out, or sort of like volunteers, like this Russian lawyer who got close to the NRA. I forgot her name. But anyway, it's okay. You just, if they get caught, well, somehow we deal with it. But we scare the Americans a little bit. I don't think they scare intelligence officials or government officials who are properly briefed, but the population.
Speaking of that, I've got some more questions in now. This is from Jason Gable. To this day, do you continue to look over your shoulder?
I never did, and I tell you why. This is not the answer that he's looking for, but looking over your shoulder was from day one was hammered into me. You don't do that. You never ever look back, because that's a sign that you're worried that somebody might be behind you. But he's after more of a generic answer. Am I sort of worried? How much time do I have? The short answer is I always say no, not really. But I some 2 years ago, I proved to myself that I was lying to myself. And this is an interesting anecdote. I was in Germany on a book tour, and at the end, I was mingling with some people, and there was this odd character who came up to me, and we had a conversation about how he was so surprised that I could sleep well, and it was all about sleeping. And I eventually he was too much of a nuisance, so I extended my hand to say goodbye to him, and he touched with his, rather than grabbing my hand, he touched my wrist, my right hand wrist, with his left hand, and then looked me in the eyes and he says, "And I wish you a wonderful night." So I go back to the hotel. I take my shirt off, and where he touched me, there was a red spot.
Oh, wow.
So
Whoa.
I had a traveling companion. I called him and I says, "Hey, do we know anything about this church, and do we know anything about this guy? Should I call a doctor? I didn't want to call a doctor and feel and then be told, there's nothing. I didn't want to be found out that I'm unreasonably scared." And as we were talking, eventually this red spot disappeared. It was apparently sort of a contact reaction to something that he had on his hand. But
It's still
it
creepy
was
out.
soon after the attempt on Skripal. So it clearly was proof to me that I'm still concerned. Let's put it this way.
Wow. And I mean, with Putin, especially, I mean, I don't know if you have any of that, but people seem to die or suffer very greatly outside of the country when they cross him. Maybe that's just me, but
Yeah.
things like radiation poisoning is pretty creepy.
Yes, you don't want to cross Mr. Putin. You don't want to get into the top 5 of his enemies list. And so I stay away from any kind of personal attacks for which I don't have any ammunition anyway.
Right.
When people ask me, "What do you think of Putin?" I said, well, the answer is, the kind of government he's running, but he is one of the smartest politicians in the last century or two, and because he's maintaining power in a country that's not doing so well overall.
Yeah. Is he more of a strongman
Yeah.
leader versus a communist type
Oh,
person?
communism, I think, is not important to him. That ideology he must have shed a long time ago. He may not ever have embraced it. He is a Russian nationalist. And as you may remember, he once stated in public that the greatest tragedy of the 20th century was the fall of the Soviet Union. So he sees himself in line of the strongmen that ruled Russia and the Soviet Union in between. So we're talking with a whole line of czars, and then you had Lenin and you had Stalin. And after that, were a bunch of weak leaders of the Soviet Union, and Putin is trying to rebuild that strength for Mother Russia. Mother Russia is something that Americans that expression is very difficult to understand unless you have been to Russia or you have been exposed to Russian literature and culture. It's very, very strong.
Well, yeah, and we really can't understand it because it's almost anathema to America, isn't it?
Yeah, Mother America doesn't exist. Father America doesn't exist. We, what we have in our DNA is still, even sometimes there's only vestiges. It's called freedom. The ability to go out and discover the new land and have adventures and go places and do stuff, right?
Right.
That is quite different from maintaining the status quo and making sure that you're defending your borders and all this. So there's a whole lot of different historically evolved attitude in being a Russian and running Russia as a country.
Well, perfect. I have another question coming in. And folks, please ask questions. That's why we're here. I definitely want to hear from you. I know Jack wants to hear from you as well. This is from Gavin Stone. Gavin is an author. He wants to know, do you feel feedback and communication of your achievements would have changed the outcome of your career and life overall?
Try that question again, please, and because that I can answer this 10 different ways, and I would like to zero in on what the question really is after.
Okay, perfect. Do you feel feedback and communication of your achievements would have changed the outcome of your career and life overall? I guess that's a hard one for you because you have achievements as a spy, you have achievements as a worker in America in the corporate world, achievements as a father.
Yeah, I even had achievements in East Germany. I was awarded a national scholarship that was a rarity. I was hired as an assistant professor and was on a career path straight to tenured professor. Tenured professors in Europe have a much higher standing than in the United States. So yeah, which one? And now I'm an author, and I did reasonably well with the book. So that's why I wanted to and I don't know in what way either one of these achievements, had an influence upon my life, because almost nothing I ever did was planned ahead of time. It was. Go ahead.
What is your greatest achievement to you? That would probably be an interesting question.
That's a new one. I never heard that one before. I want to make it really small, because the most important is to raise your children, and once I just told both of my adult children in the United States, they're 33 and 30, both of them individually. I told them, based on how they're doing in their profession and how they are as individuals, I told them I would hire you. And that's the biggest compliment I could make, because I don't hire friends. I never hired friends and relatives. I only hired competence. So I'm very proud of them, and I have good reason to one day say I'm proud of you to my 9-year-old, even though right now she's fighting me tooth and nail.
Well, from what I hear, that's a little bit of you, maybe facing yourself. So
yeah.
Ironically, the pride may be, well, you're just as strong-willed as I am, and you are your own person, kid.
Yeah, but we just got to make sure that it doesn't go overboard, because you don't want to go bowling and as a young person and the ball jumps outside of the bumper guards. That is a problem.
True. And we have another question from Marcel Penzari. Who do you see currently as a bigger threat, Russia or China? And if you don't mind, go into details as to why.
Well, hands down, China. And I'm not the only one, as Marcel might understand, that I have a lot of connections either with retired uh, intelligence professionals in the United States, primarily CIA and FBI, and even informal relationships with the FBI. All of us, we are in unison stating the same thing. It's China. Reason number one, China is economically much more powerful, and that means they have a whole lot more resources to put into espionage. Uh, you know, Russia's economy is equal to roughly what the state of
Georgia, I heard.
California, Texas. Maybe it went down with the oil prices coming down quite a bit. China is number two in the world, behind the United States, not too far in sort of overall wealth.
Mhm.
So this is a country that needs to be taken seriously no matter what. China also has had a history of always it's very hegemon. I know only the
Hegemonious?
hegemony is very good. That's why you are the YouTube guy and I'm not. So thousands of years of Chinese imperium, and the communists are doing the same thing. There's always these long-term plans, and the Chinese have proven to counterintelligence that they are a force to be reckoned with. The most recent spies that have been caught that were dangerous weren't Russians, they were Chinese. And that's it. Russia has to be taken seriously for one reason only, and that's their nuclear arsenal, which is bigger than, outside of the United States, it's the second biggest.
Right.
And you have to have a relationship with them. You don't want to get to a point where they feel so threatened that they launch something.
Are you afraid of that? Because that is something that I personally worry about, and I don't know enough about it, but I wonder if Russia is economically in trouble. And sometimes, a cornered animal, or, a country that's potentially unstable. I worry about an unstable Russia.
One thing I know, neither the Soviets nor the Russians are suicidal.
Thank God for that.
They're not driven by a suicidal agenda such as the radical Muslims. Um, I would be more worried about some of those weapons falling into the wrong hands, and B, because it's an aging arsenal that may not be as well maintained as it was in the beginning. Some accidental launch. Having said all of that, I can worry about it all day. I can't do anything about it. So I usually put these thoughts out of my mind. That was my MO anyway, because if I had worried about everything that I was doing, my head would have exploded. So I sort of focus on what I can actually impact, influence, and that nuclear conflict, it's way out of my sandbox.
Okay, so compartmentalization is a tool of yours.
A big one. I probably have more compartments than the town I live in and the rest of the folks together.
But that's also been a challenge for you. I think we were talking about that in my previous interview, that
Yeah.
You felt really alone, partly because of that.
That, and I have two major compartments that really don't talk to each other very well. I speak fluent German, I speak fluent English, but if you were throwing a German word at me right now, my English would halt. Because a different part of my brain would start firing, and the German and the English have not learned to communicate, because I learned English from German up to a point, and then I learned German English based on English, and suppress the German, so the two do not communicate. And while I was, living that double life, the German and the English persona of me also did not really communicate very well. To what extent there's still residual effort impact, I don't know. I wish some neuroscientist would come out of the woodworks and put some electrodes on my brain and figure out what's going on in there.
Well, that makes me wonder, and I always ask polyglots, especially, what language do you think in? Do you
English.
think in both, depending on what you're doing?
English. Absolutely English.
Wow.
The only thing that's left over, and I read about this, and I'm not an exception, I still count a German.
Maybe it's a residual so early in development.
Maybe, but I started dreaming in English at the end of my first year in the United States, and ever since then, English became my primary language, the language I'm more fluent in, and the language I'm thinking in and dreaming in. But I can switch to German. Give me about a week in Germany, and you wouldn't know the difference.
Wow. See, that's amazing to me because I speak mostly one language.
Okay. That's okay, as long as you speak one.
Exactly. All right. I have another question. Actually, here's a follow-up from Gavin on his earlier communication from the KGB about your achievements in America as opposed to compartmentalization.
Okay.
So achievements.
See, this is a double-edged sword here. I always thought that I didn't achieve much. And in my own mind, I didn't, because I clearly didn't find out any secrets. I clearly didn't make contacts with folks that were decision makers or influenced decisions. All I did was hear, and then I did some special tasks. I wrote reports about the mood amongst Americans. I profiled people that could have been recruited. But in my mind, as the super ambitious person, I hadn't achieved enough. But then again, apparently, and there's people in the United States intelligence services who said you are underestimating your value to the KGB. The fact that you were here, that means, was very important to them. And I have to sort of, but I didn't know this. I didn't embrace it. And even today, I have a tendency to underplay because I don't like bragging about myself. I survived. I managed to stay altogether 16 years undiscovered, which I believe is a record, because the previous record was Colonel Abel, who was featured in The Bridge of Spies, who managed 11 years. And that in and of itself is counted as an achievement. And while I was here and active, I was an important asset to the Soviets. They just didn't take advantage of me in that manner.
That makes me curious. I believe your ultimate mission was to establish an identity and then build, if you will, a fortune and influence around yourself, like become a financier or industrialist, something like that. But if they knew that there was a 10-year shelf life, I mean, most people don't become an industrialist in 10 years. It takes 20.
The original plan would have worked if it hadn't been for the damn little detail. The devil is always in the detail. The plan was for me to, once I get a genuine American passport, for me to travel, move to a German-speaking European country and establish a business there. And then, and the Russians had experience in doing that. They would have funneled a bunch of monies into that business in some way. And let's say the business grows to about 10 million and I repatriate the money, come back to the United States. At that point, people might ask us, how did you make all that money? Well, I have a great cover story. People wouldn't even go look any further, whatever it was. And with that kind of standing in society, I could have bought an apartment on Fifth Avenue and knock on the doors of the Westchester Country Club, which has an whatever initiation fee of $100,000, and
Have
they would let
parties.
me in. Bingo. And with my very deep and wide education, I wouldn't have any problem, socializing with upper class individuals in American society. That failed. And so Plan B that failed because I made some mistakes when applying for the passport. Passport was not issued. So now Plan B was a long ramp up. I was already an existing asset. I already made it as an American. I was already in society. I had a job. So they said, well, go to college and try it that way. And that was a much longer, it wasn't planned that way, but it was a much longer point to where I could have been useful. And at one point, if I had still been in the pay of the KGB, I would have been useful because I worked 15 years in the electric energy industry.
Right.
Yeah.
Which put you on the grid. Do you know if that has ever been successful? Have they done that either here or somewhere else? That exact plan of planting somebody, getting them in there, giving the fortune, and then they rub elbows to the top society?
Not to my knowledge, not my way, but in the 40s and 50s, that is now proven. There were a number of KGB agents in the American government, but they were born Americans and they were recruited based on their communist ideology. I mean, this used to be denied for many years, but since the Venona project, which was decrypted KGB messages, since that was made public, it's quite clear that they had people in the State Department and in other section of government. Other than that, I'm not aware.
Was that, I can't remember, it's the Rosenbergs, or I think it's Rosenbergs or Rothbergs. Is that when
No,
they found out?
The Rosenbergs were atomic spies.
Right. Is that when they found out that they, in fact, were? Because there was a big, for a long time, people were saying that they were kind of put up on false charges and executed unfairly. But I believe over time it's been proven, no, they,
the Rosenbergs, there's proof. No, the proof that the Rosenbergs were actual spies came out of the Matroking documents that he smuggled out of the KGB archives. And the Rosenbergs were not involved with a crowd that made it into U.S. government. They ran a bunch of folks that participated in stealing pieces of the atomic secret.
So like old school communists that were living here, because a lot of communism was firmly established in the United States too.
Yes, the CPUSA was a force to be reckoned with. And what happened with the folks that were successfully recruited, and I met two of them. I was actually trained by two of those. The moment they were recruited, they left the CPUSA and just checked out of political life. Yeah,
they graduated.
Those days, the KGB was extremely successful, and there's evidence that. The discussions at Yalta, where Stalin, Roosevelt, and the British guy Churchill got together, were influenced by KGB, and as a result of that, Roosevelt actually gave up Poland.
Oh wow!
And turns out that Poland became the Soviet satellite state. There was some stuff that happened that was influenced directly by the KGB.
Some real chicanery. I've got a question from Gamer Bite. It looks like. Okay, have you traveled to Russia since you quote turned? Is it a desire? Any places you wish you could go that you can't?
I don't really talk to cats.
Hey, cats I
got
cool.
two of them at home. They don't listen to me. No, I haven't traveled back to Russia, and it's one country I would not ever go to. I have no reason to. Now, there's plenty of places in Russia that I haven't seen that might be of interest, but Russia is a cold country. And, what is worth seeing in Russia even today would be the tradition. I lived in Moscow for 2 years. I went to see St. Petersburg, which is extremely interesting and very, very attractive. And there's a vast country behind it. Might be worth exploring, but I'd rather go to Brazil where it's warmer. And Russia, and any kind of a state that is sort of close to Russia would, physically as well as maybe as a potential ally, maybe I would be very cautious. For instance, if I had an invitation to go to Turkey tomorrow, I wouldn't.
How about Prague?
Yeah, no problem. Absolutely no problem. I was in Warsaw 2 years ago for about a week. As a matter of fact, the countries that used to be part of the Warsaw Pact, the communist camp, all of those are extremely safe because it's super, super anti-Soviet and anti-Russian.
Yeah, I was going to say they're almost more right-wing than the United States.
You bet. All of them. There's no exception.
It's kind of funny too, because there is sort of, we talked about it before, a new love for communism, growing here. I don't know if it's a new love or just popular love, and they call it socialism or democratic socialism. To me, it's all spectrum-y.
Let's just be real. The communist ideal has now and always will have tremendous appeal to young people. I mean, think about it. Let's all get along. We're all fundamentally good people. The reason that we are sometimes not good is because the circumstances that we are in. So if indeed we change those circumstances and whatever oppression there is, and be that, women are suppressed or people of color or people of religions or other religions, let's just all get along. This is a wonderful idea. How do you not buy into that? How do you, as a young person, as a romantic, and I grew up as a romantic. So reality is such that this romantic idea has been tried and tried and tried, and it failed every time. Because even if you take the shackles off of individuals, that doesn't necessarily make them good. Doesn't work that way?
Is that like the old Churchill saw? I don't know if it was Churchill who initially said it, but he's credited with it quite a lot. That if you're young and you're not liberal, you have no heart, and if you're old and not conservative, you have no brain.
Exactly. And that's pretty much described my journey. I still think I have a heart, except I don't allow my heart to overrule my brain. Right. And and if you pay attention to history, there's one thing I can say loud and clear: there has never been a country that successfully implemented the communist ideal. Every one of them that started, and I can imagine that Lenin actually meant what he said. He didn't want to become a dictator. He wanted to free the world from the bad capitalists, Lenin and Castro and many others. But every one of those efforts became a dictatorship, and very often a very murderous dictatorship. So
is that by design? In the sense that the design of itself kind of forces that situation, like in order to make things even, you have to control the different sectors. And then if something gets out of control, then you really have to kind of hammer it down, hammer that nail. Otherwise it's going to snag.
You're right. It's not by design. I would think it's built into the model. It's built into the model because for this to work, you have to have allegiance to the state, because the state ultimately is the most powerful agency that makes sure that everybody is happy. Yeah, but if you don't want to be happy the way the state tells you to be happy, then you are a challenge to its authority, and the authority will take various means, including imprisonment and eventually execution, to maintain its authority, because it has arrogated to itself all moral authority, and that's fundamentally, completely 180-degree opposite of the way the United States was formed and supposedly is still operating.
Now let me go piss everybody off. Let's hope the numbers don't go down. But our current situation with coronavirus and COVID, I'm seeing a lot of cases out there. They're widely reported. I don't know if this is a trend or it's aberrations, but there are people who are going outside and getting arrested, and there are prisoners who are being released. And I'm wondering, do you, with your background and your knowledge, do you fear a little bit of what you are hearing or seeing right now with the current situation?
Okay, so if you go to my website, I published about almost 2 years ago an essay, a blog entitled "Quo Vadis American Government," where I'm talking about the dangers of centralizing power. And the more you centralize it, and this happened in Germany, and who says it can't happen here? I'm not saying it happens tomorrow.
Right.
Don't put a label on me. I am.
Oh, too late. It's already done. It's in the show notes.
In terms of partisan politics, I consider myself a libertarian in philosophy, period, and I'm not an extreme libertarian. But what happened in Germany in the 30s? A highly centralized state was taken over, was ready for the taking by Hitler. If Hitler had not been able to inherit a fully functioning state, he wouldn't have been able to hang on to power. So there's, in my view, an inherent danger in too much power concentrated in one place. And our founders knew about this, and the old Romans knew about it. And the Roman Empire didn't fall apart until the emperor took care and arrogated the power all to himself. So what we see now here is more of a tendency to ask the government, whichever government it is, help us, save us. We willingly will obey your orders and so forth. And that may well be the right thing to do in a absolute crisis. The question whether this is an absolute crisis is something I don't want to argue, because there is a lot of data that are either being ignored or that are
Sure.
overplayed and so on and so forth. But if indeed it is one of those situations that does not require absolute radical measures, we should not easily give up freedoms that we are guaranteed under the Constitution. And I'm concerned that now some people will try to take the law in their own hands, and I don't like when people run around with weapons,
Sure.
Protesting against what appears to be oppressive government. One accidental shot could trigger a catastrophe. So these people are despicable. They should not do that.
I agree. And I ran off a few people. Okay, good times. So I'll jump back into safer territory. Despite current relations, do you think Russia and the USA are the best of enemies, or do you think there are bigger concerns? And I guess best of enemies is kind of like frenemies. Have you ever heard that term?
Yeah, I heard it. There was a while where it appeared to be the case. I would say we are clearly adversaries, and it's friends. No, because Russia is expanding again, and Russia is actually we have members of NATO that are feel threatened by Russian expansion. The Baltic states primarily, and the takeover of a part of what was Ukraine, Crimea, and so forth. No, here's the thing. We even have things in common with China. but we have to really clearly identify what we have in common. Neither China nor Russia nor us want a nuclear war. So
Thank God for that.
there's something where we need to work on to the extent we can, but there's many other areas where we won't be friends and can't be friends.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I guess we want there to not be too many other adversaries either. So at least we understand each other to a point.
Yeah, and you really also got to focus on the ones that really can do you harm. And these two countries are still number 1 and 2. Never mind North Korea and Iran.
North Korea is the cat's paw of China in many ways, though, aren't they? I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like China completely holds up North Korea. But I also wonder if they just kind of go, "Hey, NK, go do some stuff, go cause some trouble."
Yeah, without support from China, North Korea would have been dead a long time ago. It's a club that they're swinging, and it's sort of there is no direct link, but we all know it that they're using North Korea, and North Korea, the dictators there are willing to be used because they know without China they wouldn't exist. Well, the other country that you want to worry about is Iran. But if God forbid it ever came to a war, we would destroy Iran in a day. I'm not saying we should. I'm not saying we.
No, I understand that. Well, it will be draconian, though. I mean, we could, but then the death toll it would be so beyond.
And they know that, and that's why the mullahs in Iran apparently love their life too. They're not the suicidal ones. They
send others to do it for them.
They tell young children that it's good for them to die for Allah.
Yeah, always a fun thing. Question here from Old Mop Parse Rule. So I have to go phonetically. It's an odd one. Did Jack ever interact with Robin Dreek? Robin Dreek's actually been a guest on the show a couple of times in the live stream. He was FBI counterintelligence, and he was responsible for building relationships with Russian intelligence. And if so, do you have any stories you could tell?
No, the name just came to my attention because of your program. I have not met him. I just heard about him, but I did meet here in Atlanta a fellow who was in counterintelligence, and he was at one point deployed in New York City, and his task was to look for people like me.
Wow.
That's looking for a really small needle in a huge haystack. And so one time he was there at a presentation that I made, and I spoke about him, and I said it took him a long time, but he eventually found me in Atlanta.
What do you think about the spycraft or the law enforcement capabilities from what you've seen, just in general?
Who is spycraft?
The U.S. I mean, as someone who has done it, I mean, do you have a professional appreciation for the law enforcement spycraft? Or
I know the FBI better than I know the CIA. The FBI, I worked with real active FBI agents, and I have very much respect for these folks. They, with one exception, and there's always an exception.
He's an asshole.
They were highly intelligent people, patriotic people, played by the rules. They would complain about the rules, but they played by the rules. And, I have nothing but good things to say about the FBI. I know of the CIA because I have now friends who used to be CIA, and these folks know they know their spycraft. They know it well. The problems that the CIA ran into was primarily with rogue operations, with funded operation that then were allowed to go on their own, take the money, and do whatever they thought was right. Those operations very often went wrong.
Well, that actually was a question I was going to have for you earlier, when I was comparing who you were as a person versus who you'd recruit. Would you deliberately recruit somebody who might be a little bit more weak of will or may
absolutely.
have problems because you can control them better versus
Oh,
somebody who's very strong-willed and thoughtful and independent, things like that?
Well, you're looking for weaknesses. My weakness would have been, in my younger years, love of self, arrogance, easy to be. I'm looking for a word. Well, easy to be sweet talked into believing his own
Sure.
greatness. That was my weakness. Other than that, I didn't have any glaring weaknesses. But we're talking about, folks who have drug addictions or folks who feel underappreciated, all kinds of character flaws, or they have a skeleton in their closet. They committed a crime that you know, or you always. This is what you're looking for: weaknesses. Now, you got to be aware that once you engage a weak character, that weakness could also be their downfall. So you have to be careful the way you're handling them.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, because I would think that you would want to have that handle to control them. Just something you can, step on.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about emotionally unstable people. If you're the handler of somebody like that, occasionally you need to just hug them and tell them that they're okay and you're their best friend and they will be taken care of, and on and on and on. You become sort of a father figure, a psychologist, the best friend, and all that. I've heard this many successful handlers talk about this. I never handled anybody, but
Right. But you would have to, what I meant is you're a talent spotter. So I imagine that you would look and say, oh, look, he's got a bit of a drug issue. He might be a good one. He's sharp. He's sleeping around a little bit on his girlfriend. He's got a bit of a drug habit and he has access to this stuff.
Well, he has alcohol in his breath when he comes to work in the morning. That's whoa. Right. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Or deviancy. And in the old days, that was more of a problem. Nowadays, we are more liberated. And
now it's a feature.
Anymore. And I don't have an agenda here. I'm just observing. Early on, if you were a homosexual,
right,
you would have been subject to extortion. Obviously, that wouldn't work anymore.
No, I mean, ironically, you brought that up, deviancy. I mean, one of the most famous people in America right now is Kim Kardashian, who really got famous off of a porn tape.
Yeah.
And then built it from there. So how does that work? Okay, well, you start out in scandal can work just as well as honors here.
Well, that's like swallowing an immunity pill. You can't get much worse than that. So you're safe.
Okay, couple more. You got to suffer the cat again. Sorry, man. But we have hosted many high school foreign exchange students. It was always fun to listen to them call their parents on the phone after a month or two. They forgot their own native language.
Already?
I guess. I guess it's a commentary.
In 2 months, that's interesting. I can't say yay or nay. I've never observed folks who spoke in a foreign language for 2 weeks and then forgot their own. But it's possible, depending upon the fluency that they had achieved in English.
Yeah, and I'm sure it was just a case of over time you meet many people who speak foreign languages and they start to have to use like a Spanglish, for example. People,
Yes.
And they need, and it's like they know the word in English or Spanish, and you can't quite get the thing. So I wonder if it's some of that when they call home.
Absolutely, there are many words that don't have counterparts, direct translations in the other language.
Schadenfreude.
Oh, exactly, Gesundheit.
It's one of my favorite words. It is such a perfect word and so perfectly German.
Yeah, well, and the word Gestalt, which is used in the English language, is not exactly. It has a meaning that you can't. That's why we're using it, right?
Right.
It exists in English. Yeah, I get it. Mm-hmm.
And there's another one, though, Strom and Drum or something like that. I can't.
Sturm und Drang.
Yep, Strom and Drunk. Yeah, that's a cool German.
Yeah, sure. It takes a sentence to translate that.
And we have one more as we're starting to wrap up. Despite all the easier for me to say, despite all the compartmentalization, did you ever suspect anyone around you? After you made a mark for a possible asset, did you ever have further encounters where you suspected they'd turned?
All right. The answer to both is no. But I must tell you that over time, you become extremely used to the situation you're in, and with that, your guard is going down. You're not as sharp. You're not as observant. You don't see a counterintelligence agents around every corner. You cut corners instead. So, I more and more, as I said in the beginning of this session here, I became the role that I played, and that role meant that I don't have to worry about anything or anybody. And so obviously that's part of the shelf life situation.
I remember in your book too, you were getting resentful of having this interfering with your day job. You're like, I got to do all this spycraft crap. I've got to go clean this. I spend my whole damn off day just to pass the note.
On a Saturday, it took me a whole day to compose a letter in secret writing and mail it. It took me until mid-afternoon, starting early in the morning. And so, darn,
we're chilling. Everybody else in the office is home.
I like horses.
I would say that probably converted you more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have one. We got one more. I'm going to close out on. What do you say to the younger generation that's embracing socialism ideologies?
Study history. Just go read a history book. Read one book that says history of the 20th century. You don't have to go that far back. 20th century. That's all. And make up your own mind after that. Rather than me telling you don't. You should make up your own mind and use your brain. I'm saying I wouldn't blame anybody who falls in love with socialist, communist ideals. And remember, everybody. It is part of human nature. We are competitive animals, and everybody ultimately is wired to look out for themselves first. There's a lot of people who have overcome this, but the instinct is always to look out for yourself or at least your family. And government individuals are people too. And so what is their immediate instinctive first interest? It must be preservation of self, because if you're not preserving yourself, how can you do good things for others?
Good point.
You cannot lose that instinct to be somewhat selfish. You can't.
That's a great message to wrap up on. Now, Jack tours all over the place. You do a presentation. It's always available for hire, correct?
Yeah, sure. When people are allowed to gather again, sure. That I'm actually going to do it's the first. I'm going to do one for hire via this vehicle. In the interest of full disclosure, this one is free because I like Eric.
Well, and Eric thanks you. Eric doesn't have the budget.
Yeah, and just check in with me occasionally. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. I don't do Twitter. I can't express myself in this you people who hung in there, they know that I tend to be rather verbose.
Well, and everybody can find you also at jackbarsky.com.
Yes,
they can see all of your time with 60 Minutes, things like that.
Yeah.
And just to let everybody know, if you like guests like Jack Barsky, Robin Dreek, who we brought up earlier, Chase Hughes, who just texted me on the side, who's a behavioral engineer, body language readers, please subscribe. I have more coming, and you get a chance to communicate. So thank you very much, Jack.
You're most welcome.
And thank everybody for watching.
All right.